14, starting with verse 22.
Praise the Lord.
Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on a mountainside by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But the boat was already a considerable distance from the land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Well, then Peter got down out of the boat, and he walked on the water and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid. Beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You have little faith," he said. "Why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." And when they had crossed over, to the land of Gennesaret, and when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. And people brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sickness touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched him were healed. This is the gospel of Christ.
Praise Christ.
You may be seated. Now last week, we talked about the funerals last week. It was good. We did. And I expressed to you that, certain things about the supernatural, miraculous element, and I was challenged a bit on that interpretation. But I wanted to let you know that this week, as I mentioned in my precursor before, I do believe in the supernatural. I do believe in miracles. And I believe this is one of those times. Now, one of the reasons I believe this is one of those times is because this is a crazy story. Who would come up with this? I can think of a lot of different stories to come up with than a guy getting out of the boat. I mean, there's some pretty crazy stuff going on here. And you got the projector there? So I started asking myself this question. Why would Peter get out of a boat, perfectly seaworthy boat, in the middle of a storm? There's a couple of reasons. But the first thing I would ask is, would you? How many of you would get out of a boat? I mean, the storm, if it was me, I'd be hanging on to something. With a life jacket. And an emergency rack. The last thought in my mind would be, get out of this boat. Why would he do it? What in the world would possess him to step over the side? Maybe he was an adrenaline junkie. That's what I started thinking. Because let's face it, people do crazy things, don't they? I mean, New Zealand invented bungee jumping. And really, they learned it, where they learned it from? The guys in Vanuatu who tie vines to their ankles and jump on. People do crazy things. I saw a guy drive a kayak up a waterfall. I mean, a waterfall. People have been jumping in barrels and going over Niagara Falls. People have put tight ropes over Niagara Falls to walk over. People have strung lines between the World Trade Center and walked across them. People do crazy things for the thrill. Maybe he was seeking the thrill, And I know that there are a lot of people, you know what? your life? I used to grow up, when I was growing up in North Carolina, they'd be saying, oh, you can be a missionary, and you'll go here, and you'll go there, and you can do this, and you can do that. Oh, and there's going to be this. And you just think, oh, man, this would be the best thing ever. So a lot of people, the reason they want to follow Jesus is because it could be a thrill. It's a thrill in it. I know a lot of people, that's when they especially of our more, sort of charismatic Pentecostal folk, it's the thrill of it. What can happen? I remember going to Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship when there was this big thing. Have you ever heard of the Toronto Blessing? I remember going to this church. People come from thousands and thousands of miles, and they're all amped up, ready for something exciting to happen. Something's going to happen at any moment. Then everybody got up to the microphone and said, something's going to happen at any moment. At any moment, God's going to do something. And everybody goes, ooh. God says it's a thrill. But what happens when it ain't so thrilling? What happens when it ain't so exciting? What happens when you look down the road and maybe China ain't waiting? Maybe you feel a little old for that. Are you still going to get out of the boat? So maybe he was an adrenaline junkie. I don't think so. Maybe he was just tired of rolling. You know what I mean? Maybe he's just got tired of it. I remember being in the middle of Lake Champlain, a storm came up. And I'm rowing the boat. I got my little brother Danny and my cousin Scott. My cousin Scott, man, he cried so much. He was just stuck and stop crying. I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm like, shut up. I'm just rowing this thing. I think I was about 16 and just rowing this boat. You ever rowed against the wind? Man. And finally, honestly, my arms were aching. And the wind kept blowing. The water was coming up over the sides. And I just got to a point, and I was like, kill me. God darn. I would have jumped out of the boat just to swim the shore. You ever get tired of rowing? Anybody ever get tired of rowing? So you just feel like, my goodness, when does it stop? When can I get out of the boat? So maybe that's where he was at. He was just tired. You got to be better than this. Totally exhausted. Or maybe it was for the first time. For the first time, Peter was in the midst of a situation. They got the right thing? Yeah. Okay. He was in the midst of a situation where he is literally over his head. It's way too big for him. He is, by all accounts, he was sort of the rough and tumble fisherman. He was the guy who knew stuff, right? He was the self-assured one. He was the one he was the go-to man. He could get things done. He was confident. But finally something breaks in him. Finally he gets to a point where he realizes this is way too big for me. This is way too hard for me. Perhaps he's in a place where he is so at the end of his own strength that he can finally hear and see Jesus for who he really is. Because you know what, saints? That's usually what happens. And that's what has to happen for us. We got to get to a place. And this is why most of us dance around the edges of Jesus. Most of us dance around the edge of faith. We like the architecture. We like the idea. We like the idea of it. We like the story. We like the community of it. We like the warm fuzzies of it. But when you get close to this flame, let me tell you, it burns. It burns something inside of you. And see, we don't like to get that close. But the only reason we do get that close is because we are confronted with something. We're confronted with ourselves. We're confronted that we don't have what it takes. We don't have what it takes in and of ourselves. We need something more. I can remember that night. I can remember many nights for me. See, because it isn't a one-time deal, is it? How many times have you ever felt more than once like it was just you were in a situation too big to handle on your own? See, I believe this is where finally Peter could tune in and hear the voice of God. Because listen to what happened. Over their cries of fear, oh, we're all going to die, I'm exhausted, somebody, what? You can imagine what's going on. Over their cries of fear, they hear something. They hear something. It's a voice coming over the waves. And it's Jesus saying, take heart. Can you hear that today? Can you hear those two words today? If you hear no other two words, let me tell you, my feet are beautiful because I bring you good news. Take heart. Take heart. It is I. Now you're going to understand, this is the great translation of this. What he says is, take heart, I am. Where have we heard that word before? Where have we heard that name before? I am the light of the world. I am the good shepherd. I am the bread of life. I am. He proclaims he is more than just a fellow. He is more than just a specter. God has come to them. And God's come walking to them on the very source of their adversity. God has used the very thing that's threatening to kill them to be their salvation. Think of that. They were over their heads. And he says, take heart. I am. Say this with me. Do not be afraid. Can you say it with me?
Do not be afraid.
We live in a world that trains you to be afraid. Disciples you to be afraid. Everywhere you look, there's fear. What's going to happen? Do not be afraid. Take heart. I am. Now here's the thing. When I was a kid, I used to play war. You know, we'd be out there and I'd smudge mud all over my face. Then I'd go out and I'd hide behind a log and cover myself with leaves, and I'd have an M16 rifle and I'd be there waiting for the enemy to come around the corner so I could ambush them. Anybody ever play war when you were kids? Only three of us, okay. Well, believe me, for the rest of you, it's fun. It's real fun. I'm sitting there and I'm so camouflaged, and I was holding, I had a hold before it. I was the one there, and I was going to snipe anybody who wasn't on my team. And we had like this base, and we had a flag, and then I hear something come. I hear a twig snap. Who's there? Who's there? And we always have a password, right? You know what I'm talking about? You ever play a game password? Always have a password. And you can always tell when somebody was trying to mimic the voice of somebody not on their team. And they're trying to figure out the password. You're dead meat. See, Peter hears his voice. In the middle of the storm. In the middle of the storm. The moment the disciples see Jesus really for the first time, the thing that Peter hears when Jesus says, take heart, I am, don't be afraid. He says, what's the password? See, he knows only Jesus would ask him to do something so stupid to get out of the boat. He knows that only Jesus would ask him to take a risk so big. Only Jesus would ask him to do that. What's the password? If that's who you are, what's the password? Tell me to get out of this boat. The password is, come. Come. That's our password today, people. Jesus says, come. You're Are you afraid? Come. Walk on it. Walk on that water. I won't let you down. I'll be there with you. You'll never be alone. See, I was noticing something the other day. I had this appointment with a lawyer who was offering to take me to lunch. So I was really looking forward to lunch. Because I know it was in Wellington. I had this thing, and he was telling me about this amazing restaurant. And he wanted to take me to lunch there. And I was like, woohoo! I like free lunch at amazing restaurants. So I get in the car, and I've got another meeting. I got a supervision meeting at 2 o'clock, and I'm like, I want plenty of time for my lunch, so I'm in the car around 11:30. I'm heading over the hill to get to this lawyer's office. He's going to take me to a great lunch. I get around, and I stopped at the gas station, check my oil, check my water, because it's an old car, and so I get to the rimmers, start going up, and you go around the bridge with the curve, and then there's all the little those piles of gravel. Well, suddenly my car starts going, stuff starts flying out of it, and then it stalls. And I pull off the side, and I'm in this turnout thing, and I try to start it up, and it's like, oh, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? It's going to happen. And I'm thinking, there goes lunch. Dang, looking forward to that lunch. But then I started thinking, oh, crap, I just blew up my car. That stinks. It's like, that's just what I needed. Missed the lunch and the car. And I could have really used supervision today. That was, oh, God. What am I going to do? So I call AA, and of course they're going to be there in an hour and a half. Like, what do you got to do? Build the tow truck? And so finally I'm just all worked up. I got all this stuff happening. It's all bigger than me. I ain't got the money for this. I can't do what's. And I'll just walk to the edge. I walk to the edge of this turnoff. And I look down, and there's a stream down there. There's no stream. And I walked down, and I just stood by the stream. And the sun hit the stream. And this peace filled my soul. Take heart. It is I. Don't be afraid. Now, it was good. Why I heard that? Because I was reading this stuff. This is a good little point for you. You read it, it comes up, and it ministers to your soul. So I know you've seen the movie, but you really should read the book. Okay? In that moment, all of a sudden, that was the only thing. All the other things just faded away. See, Jesus said, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. What that means is when you can finally single focus your heart. Purity is about one thing, right? If you have pure gold, it contains gold. If you have pure water, it contains H2O. That's all it is. You put anything else in it, it ain't pure. A pure heart is a heart that's got a way of finding single focus. When Peter was at the edge of everything, when he stepped out of that boat, all of his focus, all of it was on that promise. Take heart, it is I. Come. But notice, the moment he stopped being single focus, what happened? He started to sink. It was all going to be curtains for him. But as soon as he got his mind and his heart back in line, back focused, a single focus, he found himself back into the arms. It's when Peter focuses only on Jesus that he can walk on the water. And as soon as he focuses on all the other stuff, he almost drowns. So in the end, it seems to me that this story is an invitation to wholehearted living. I like this sign. It says, keep calm and woo! Because that's who we are. We can keep calm and we can woo-hoo. Because take heart, people. There's not a storm that's raging, but that He's with you. There's not a night so dark, but that He sees you. You are my beloved child. Take heart. Keep your mind focused. Keep your heart focused. You can walk on anything. You can walk on anything. So here's what I got to think about. I know I took a little long time there. I haven't preached for a while. I blow out the pipes. Maybe you are in the midst of a storm. How can you stop and listen? What is it going to take for you to just stop? To stop and listen for that voice. Take heart. Or maybe you feel like your faith is empty. Maybe you're just going through the motions. How can the storms break you free out of that? Maybe you need to go looking for a storm. You need something that's going to break you out of that. Here's a question that I got really challenged with. When is the last time that I felt like following Jesus was a risky adventure? When was the last time you felt like following Jesus is a real risky adventure? Because I tell you it is, if you're doing it right. And how is Jesus calling you? How is Jesus calling you today to step out of the safety of your boat? To walk on whatever it is that's threatening to destroy you? How is he calling you to come in? I pray that during the Eucharist, may you taste, may you feel, may you sense the presence of Jesus. The one who says, take heart. I am. Don't be afraid. Is that good news? Got some beautiful feet, don't we? Let's stand up and affirm our faith.